Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Heidi McCutcheon with the Shelton-Mason County Chamber of Commerce. Probably a lot of you have heard that President Trump has yet to sign off on this, even though Congress and the Senate have come to an agreement. It looks like he's holding out primarily on the individual payment that will go out. And so we're hopeful that the remainder of this will continue as we know it. So just to kind of go over what we do know. First off, I'll let you know that the SBA and Treasury still need to update the application for the Paycheck Protection Program before banks and credit unions can provide these loans. So from that, I'll just go ahead and kind of go over some of the changes of what we know to be happening. So PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, many of you know about and used round one, which was available earlier this year. Round two is now rolling out. This should be looked at as similar, but a separate program because it is different. Allowable expenses have changed. The amounts have changed for some people and so on. So some of the changes include operations software. So if you have business software, cloud computing, sales monitoring, accounting services that you're utilizing to manage the PPP expenses, those will now be forgivable expenses. Supplier costs. So if it's some kind of supply that is essential to keep your business open and running, is now also an allowable expense. They did say that this is a contract that must be in effect before you take the loan. However, they have made the caveat that with respect to perishable goods, so if it's a restaurant, if you have lettuce that's coming in, that would be an allowable expense. It's not necessarily a regular contract. I'm looking for some clarification on that because they did say that inventory is not a allowable expense, but supplier costs are. So trying to get a definition of what the difference between those two are. Worker protection is now an allowable expense. So PPE, outdoor seating, sneeze guards, etc., will now be an allowable expense or a forgivable expense. So for those of you that are able to serve outside, etc., that kind of equipment will be forgivable within the new PPP guidelines. That said, the 60-40 rule still remains. So if you want this to be fully forgivable, 60% needs to be spent on payroll costs to have that fully forgiven. So as you move forward with this, just make sure that you're keeping that in mind so that you're not penalized and having to repay a portion of it. So the time period has changed. So now it begins when you originate your loan. And you, the borrower, can decide how long you want that to go. So it can be 8 weeks up to 24 weeks. And you get to decide how long you want to take to calculate for those expenditures. So if it's something that you haven't yet expended 60% of the loan that you get on payroll, I would recommend that you extend that out until you're able to make that 60-40 rule. The nice thing about this is that calculation can begin either in the previous 12 months, or it can be looked at your 2019 wages. For those of you that have had closures or reduced occupancy, etc., you don't have to use the last couple of months when you've laid staff off, but you can look at your 2019 wages and have your loan based off of that calculation. They have made some changes as far as this loan is not taxable income. Initially, the IRS said, yeah, we can't tax the income, but we're going to or make it so that you can't write off your business expenses if it was purchased with the PPP, which is kind of a back end way of taxing that. They now have changed that, so the IRS cannot limit your deductions anymore. If the loan is less than 150,000, everybody has to request forgiveness on the PPP. If the loan is less than 150, then there's just a one-page attestation, and that's for both rounds. So there is a common misconception that if the amount for PPP is less than 150, you don't have to do anything, and that is not the case. So please make sure that you are filling out that paperwork to be forgiven. There is a certain amount of funding that's set aside for first-time PPP applicants, and there are some new industries that are allowed to access that. So 501c6s is one of those. Those are business organizations like the chambers. Also news media outlets. So I've already reached out to some of our locals here as far as the Journal and iFiber, so they're aware of that. So second draw for some businesses. If you've exhausted all of your funding from round one PPP, you have less than 300 employees, and you can demonstrate at least a 25% drop in gross sales, you can qualify for this second round of PPP. It's recommended that you apply again, even if you were denied in round one. There may be some changes, and of course, your lenders can work with you to see how that's worked. Initially, if you got the PPP, you weren't able to get the employee retention credit, and that's changed. So now you can get both. So you can access the funds now from 2020.
1, 3,
oh gosh,
6.
Stop. Sorry. So you can access the employee tax credit for employee retention tax credit, sorry, for 2020 as well as 2021. So the way that it works for 2020 is it's up to 50% of your each employee's payroll up to $10,000. So basically a max of $5,000 per person. Now this coming into 2021 for first and second quarter, it's 70% of the first 10,000 per person. So that's a $7,000 max per quarter per person for the first 2 quarters of 2021. And again, you can access both of those even if you've already got PPP, which is a new development. The maximum for that is up to $2 million the loan amount for PPP is up to $2 million, which is 2.5 months of payroll. Now, certain NAICS codes, so looking at you, Lonnie and Jody, if you guys have your NAICS code that begins with 72, which is accommodation and food services, your PPP loan amount can be 3.5 months of payroll costs. And again, you can base that off of your 2019 numbers, not necessarily off of your 2020 numbers. So it's just a little extra that they're able to give off. Forgiveness, of course, for PPP is reduced if you reduce more than 25% of your employee count or hours. There are a couple of safe harbors. So if it's because of COVID health restrictions, like if you're required to close, there's different means of which your forgivability will change. One of the new things that we've seen is the live venue operation grant. So this is a grant, you don't have to ask for forgiveness. It's just goes directly to the business or organization. What this is for theaters, arts, entertainment, museums that rely upon ticket sales for their business or organization. These businesses, if they show a loss of at least 25% in gross receipts, 2020 compared to 2019, they would be eligible for the grant. And basically it's 45% of their 2019 receipts up to 10 million. So that's a nice chunk of change. With that, you can't get round 2 PPP. And this, we asked some clarifying questions. So if you are a restaurant that has live music, that wouldn't necessarily qualify you for the live venue operation grants. It's if you are like an event center, a corral. We've reached out to the senior center because a lot of their receipts come from bingo karaoke, so we're hopeful that they'll be able to qualify for this. But we're still looking for further definitions on that. The loans, the economic injury loans have reopened. So if you have not received the $10,000 forgivable grant, you should feel free to apply for that. To qualify this time, you need to show a reduction of at least 30% in your gross receipts during any 8-week period from March through December. So previously, if you had a PPP loan, you had to subtract out any amount you got from the EIDL loan. That no longer is required, but you can't use the funds for the same expense. So I can't write off March payroll for my staff with the PPP and use the same payroll for the EIDL loan. So as long as it's different expenses, you can utilize that both. Kind of went over the employee retention tax credit. I don't know that there's any other information on that. The pandemic unemployment assistance begins again in January, and that will run through mid-March. And right now it's an extra $300 per week, whereas previously it was $600 per week. Outside of that, there is funding that will be allowed for housing assistance designed to help people behind on rent. My understanding is that has to go through an organization such as Crossroads to help dole that out to help the tenants catch up on that. Lastly, there is SBA loan debt forgiveness. So if you had a small business loan previous to February, before February, then you would get 3 months of your payments forgiven by the SBA. And so those payments could be up to $9,000 per borrower per month. And so that's a really nice cushion as well. So I think that's about all that I have on my notes to go over. I know that Lisa Woodard and Chris Kirkley are both on this call. They are local SBA approved financial institutions that have access to these. And as everything rolls out and the application becomes available, that they will be able to begin processing. Chris, do you have anything that you want to know at this time?
I want to know, yeah, there's a lot of things I want to know. There's so many unknowns with the program now. I mean, you shared a lot of the nuggets of information that we've been able to cobble together as well. I was reading through some more things last night, and those that are applying first time PPP borrowers, it appears that they're going to be subject to the original rules rather than second draw rules. So that's a bit of a nuance there too. But I would definitely recommend that if you're interested in either first time or second time, whether it's Peninsula or other institution, to go ahead and reach out to those institutions to kind of get on a list. We've started a list as well of businesses that we'll be reaching out to once SBA does finalize all the details of the program. Hopefully, well, the word is that as soon as the package is either approved by Trump or he vetoes and it goes back and they approve, the SBA will have 10 days to come up with the rules regarding how the program is going to work.
And last time we saw a really quick turnaround on that, correct? It was like 3 days or, well, yeah, at least the initial rulemaking.
Yeah, we saw a quick and then subsequent, you know, the term even the SBA used last time was, you know, we were flying the plane as we were still building it. So there will probably be a little bit of that this go around as well.
Good. Lisa, is there anything that you want to add in?
Yeah, I think it's great advice to be prepared prior. So if you're going to submit a package, it's probably a good idea to have everything ready now, so you can go to work with your financial institution right away. Last time, it was a very big flow going through a tiny funnel, and I think that the system is probably a little bit better now, but I don't know what it will look like too. So everybody wants it to be fairly seamless. So the banks, I know we have a website that's up that will give you a link directly to SBA that will kind of outline the things that you need. It can be, if you have not applied for it yet, it can be a bit overwhelming. So I would encourage you to reach out. I would just say, do SBA.gov. There is a good section in there that does have some answers, and it can be overwhelming. So reach out to your bankers and your resources.
And can you guys, one of you, quickly kind of go over what needs to be amassed, what kind of reporting you need to process these?
The SBA has some documentation and application that needs to be completed, and then your payroll 940s for the periods of time. And what else, Kirk? What else was I missing?
Tax returns, if they're self-employed, it would be tax returns that we'd be using. Most have been submitting the quarterly tax statements we've been using, or payroll records through CPA.
Yeah, your payroll summaries.
Yeah.
And independent contractors do qualify for this again. So if that's not necessarily payroll, but
Yes.
the tax returns dictate what that should amount to.
Yes.
Good. Does anybody have any questions about what we've gone over and kind of what we know, and well, what we think we see in the cloudy crystal ball? Yes, James.
Yeah, I was here also for some of our clients. I told them I was going to be here. So yeah, a couple of our clients are like Matt at his landscaping company. He was denied PPP. So what Chris is saying, if it's the same rules as the first round, he'll get denied again. So he shouldn't apply, or should he try to apply again?
I would say he should apply. I mean, I don't know his situation, why specifically he was denied. I have heard, and can't speak to his situation, but I have heard that some were denied not because the business itself was denied, but it could have been the financial institution had run out of their funding or the threshold that they put on themselves. So there were many that I talked to that were in that boat and just either said they were denied or without a response at all.
Okay. And then a follow-up question for the other with some of our clients. And I guess it's sort of apply even our company. As our understanding was the SBA and some of the other loans would not apply to, like we work with a painting company, landscaping company, construction companies that work out of their trucks. They don't have physical addresses. So will the SBA and the other assistant loans work for those people that don't have physical business locations? The ones particularly, Heidi, that you mentioned, all of them? Or is it just the PPP that goes to companies that can go to companies that don't have physical locations?
My understanding is you can use your home address as a physical location, whether it's, your business is out of your house or not. But that it doesn't have to be a brick and mortar to qualify for this. If you have payroll and you can show that your staff has, that you have been making those payments. And I know Matt in particular has been around for a while, so my guess is that probably the funding ran out, or whatever institution he went to no longer had the ability to do any more funding. But particularly now that you can choose which date range you want to base your payroll off of, that might make or break one way or another. They also now, you know, I know his is one of the industries that was shut down, so I'm guessing that he can probably show that there's been a loss in gross receipts, and based off of that should strengthen the ability for him to get that.
Okay, yeah, that's excellent news then, because yeah, our understanding, in fact, we had reached out to the SBA and they had told us that you had to have a physical address in order to get the SBA loan. So that's new information. That's great. Thank you.
Troy, I think you had a question also.
Yeah, it was just about some wording that I saw come out. I was just curious what it means. The breakdown said that that first and second draw issued by community financial institutions, including community development financial institutions and minority depository institutions. I'm assuming community development is like EDC, things like that. What is the community financial institutions? Is that banks, credit unions? Is that what that means? Is it something different?
I'll kick it to
I
Jim
can help with
Morrell.
that if you like.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, everybody. The U.S. Treasury has a program that's called the Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI program. Peninsula is certified as a CDFI, which targets areas that are economically stressed and demonstrates their support of those areas. So when you're seeing CDFI, it's those certified banks and credit unions that have that designation. There's also other CDFI entities, but that's a little bit more confusing. Some tribes have CDFI entities like out on the coast. Minority deposit institutions is a different designation for institutions that focus on minority owned businesses. Peninsula is not an MDI, but that's that designation as well. So there are certain provisions in this legislation that carve out a certain amount of funding for CDFI and MDI institutions
Yeah, I saw
to be
it was,
able to provide.
Yeah, that was my question, because it says 15 billion is set aside specifically for first and second draws in those three categories, and that was set aside for it. But then there's also 284 billion that is set aside for payroll protection. So I guess my curiosity would be, if the 15 billion runs out for these specific groups, would they still be able to draw on the 284 billion?
Yeah,
Based on the way that it worked last time, yes.
Okay.
yeah. So those funds are set aside specifically for those communities, but is not limited to that amount.
Good.
So a minimum of that has to go, but that's not.
Just see a lot of them needing it. So I saw that limit and I was like, I would assume that you can still draw in, but it's to help them first initially. But I just want to make sure that was my understanding. So
Good. Thanks.
somebody asked me. So thank you.
Is there any other questions? James, go for it.
Yeah, real quick, one of our other clients. So we were working with Charlene and Leslie at the Squaxin Museum back in March to apply for PPP, and they had gone through their finance department at the tribe, and they were told that even though they were structured as a nonprofit independently, that because they were seen by the federal government as being part of the tribe, that they hit the employee ceiling for everyone employed at the hotel and the casino, and should not apply for the PPP. So they didn't know if that was correct, but that's what they were told. So I just want to know if you guys know any different, if they should still apply, because they only have like a handful of employees and they've been shut down since March. They have not reopened.
So one of the things that I would recommend for them is to take a look at that live venue grant. because that would be 45% of their 2019 gross receipts, which would far exceed the 2.5 months of payroll. And there aren't allocations as far as it has to be spent towards payroll or whatnot. So the rolling out of that, and I just emailed Charlene and Ruthie yesterday to make them aware of it. Again, we're waiting for further definition of what it looks like and how it works. I think for that one that was up to 500 employees. And basically what it will probably break down to is it a separate UBI? Is it a DBA or how their organization is working? If they're under IEI or Little Creek, to kind of define what those things are. But I think of the options available for the museum specifically, that probably that live venue operating grant would be the right way for them to go.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. And then just a follow-up question then. So say they were to get the funding and then they were to go back to, spending the money, which would include doing marketing with us. Does that then disqualify us because we're getting rehired?
Independent contractors aren't considered payroll.
Okay.
So that would be separate. You guys, Smart Meme itself could get the PPP and whatever the museum does is a separate entity. Okay. So
yeah, we were able to get PPP in the first go around. In fact, it was we were at that. I think Chris mentioned it. That the KeyBank is who we were going through, and we ran out, or KeyBank ran out of being able to offer it. But then they had a special, called it Silver Bullet program, where they were able to pick one company per region, and KeyBank picked us and then pushed us through after the fact. So we're really grateful for them for doing that. Otherwise, we would not have got it.
good. Yeah, and I think, Jim, maybe you can speak to this, but there's a way that the asset management was looked at differently for PPP. So it wasn't necessary, there was some nuances around that.
I'm not familiar with that. Chris or Lisa may be aware.
Yeah, I'm not quite following the question.
So my understanding was initially PPP loans were drawn off of each individual financial institution's assets, so that your loan limits.
Yeah. So we have our own set of regulations, and there's concentration risk associated with every type of lending that we do. And those caps and relief of those caps changed. It was one of those parts that was added on throughout. And so that allowed some institutions to expand the amount of funding that they originally had available. There was also issues at some institutions, none on this phone call, that were focused on issuing larger PPP dollar amounts because it generated more fee revenue for them, and that drew down those amounts rather quickly. I did share an article that I had come across also, and I don't know the details of this because we haven't been studying up on this, but the package does include, as I understand it, a separate $3.3 billion in dedicated COVID-19 relief funding for tribes, and an extension of the previous $8 billion that was part of the CARES Act, the original CARES Act in last March. So Dr. Google can probably provide some more details on what that tribal funding is and how it can be used and how to access it once all of this gets passed.
Can I just add one quick thing too, is that, there is a limitation to what the banks and the credit unions can lend based on the concentrations and whatnot, as Jim mentioned. But we also are good resources too, so that if it's something that we can't do, if you're working with a banker, they should have some additional resources for you and be able to, there's a list of alternative lenders and things like that we have vetted or not vetted. We can communicate that to you also. So I would recommend that you, reach out to those bankers and utilize your resources that we have here. We have a really strong group of folks that have a lot of information here. So.
Yep. So here locally, the SBA approved lenders that I'm aware of include Peninsula Credit Union, Columbia Bank, our Community Credit Union, Heritage Bank, and KeyBank. I don't know if there's any others, but those are the ones that I'm aware of, and of course they're chamber members, so we're going to always recommend that. But like Lisa just said, and I think last time when the PPP came out, that both Columbia Bank and Peninsula said, hey, we can't loan anymore here, but go talk to this person over there, and we're really good at connecting our businesses to people that had the resources available. So I'm sure that that would happen again should that situation arise. Any other questions before we call it a Christmas Eve? No? Okay. So I see that Pam Bowles is on this call also. So as we move forward, both of us will be keeping an eye on how things are rolling out and the nuances that are available. So even though we'll be technically off in the next week, please feel free to reach out to us via email or shoot us a text, and we'll do our best to find those answers for you, and perhaps may even do another one of these next week as more information becomes available. So my thanks to PCU and Columbia Bank for being on this call and helping to answer some of those questions. And I hope that everybody has a Merry Christmas and safe and Happy New Year as well. So thank you all.